Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Eddie Jennings and this is going to be the first of a four-part series on music notation. Now I'm not going to go into how to actually do music composition. I'm not going to go, this won't be a study of harmony or anything like that, but rather this is a study of just how to actually notate objects on a musical staff. And so the idea behind this is once you have learned about scales and notes and harmonies and rhythms and you start composing some things, the skills that I'm going to show you in this video series will be what you use to take those musical ideas and put them onto paper. The first of the videos is going to deal with what the staff itself is and how we notate note heads and such on the staff and how we extend the staff. The second of the videos is going to get into note names, and I'm going to talk about how you identify which particular pitches need to be placed on which particular line or space of the staff and relate that to where middle C is on the piano, so you can start now taking the pitches that you want and properly place them on the appropriate staff. The third video is going to get into notes and rhythms, not of how to perform them, but rather how to properly notate them and what they mean as far as their mathematical relationship to one another. And the last video I'm going to get into drawing measures, and this will get into a little bit of rhythm study, but rather it's showing you how all of these objects that we've been mentioning in the previous videos, how you'll actually organize them on the staff. So I hope you'll find it useful and informative. If you do, make sure that you like and subscribe to like the videos and subscribe to the channel. And without further ado, we'll begin our first video on the staff itself. Hope you enjoy it. The staff, and the plural staves, is created by 5 parallel lines, and those 5 parallel lines create 4 spaces in between them. And the point of the staff is where you place symbols, in particular notes, where you place them on the staff determines what pitches the performer is going to produce for you. When we talk about position on the staff, we always talk bottom to top. So we would have the first line, second line, third line, fourth line, and fifth line. We also have the first, second, third, and fourth space. Now, as far as what actual pitches these refer to, I'm going to cover that in another video. Today is just focusing on how to properly write the symbols on the staff itself. So you're going to have a couple of different note heads that you'll be using for producing your notes. You will have closed note heads and you will have open note heads. Now, if I have any percussionists that are in the audience, they're going to say, hey, we have all sorts of things. Sometimes we'll have triangles, sometimes we'll have plus signs, sometimes we have little diamonds, sometimes we have little like circles. At times you don't see the circles that often, but they're right. Percussion music can be special in the fact that often you will have multiple instruments on a single sheet of music. And so to make life a little bit easier for the percussionist, for example, let's say that they have a piece of music that on this one sheet music will have the triangle part, the tambourine part, a cymbal part, and a woodblock part, all on the same sheet. What a composer will often do is use different symbols for each of the instruments just to make it a little bit easier for the percussionist to know which particular instrument they should be using at a time. At a particular time to make the sounds that we want. However, the principles that we're about to go over would still apply even to some of these non-standard symbols. So if you were to draw, I'm going to use a closed note head right now. If you needed to draw a note head on the third space, as I had done here, when you draw a note head on the space, it needs to take the entire width of the space. All right, and also the note head is going to lean toward the right. You're not going to see note heads going to the left. There's your classic circle with a slash through it. You're not going to see circular note heads, or rarely rather, slash with. You're not going to see just like a little blob here. No, it's going to be an oval that is angled toward the right. Now, the same applies to open note heads. The only difference is we don't color in the note head. It is simply open. And that was, see if I can try that again with the open note head. Before I go on, yes, there is notation software out there that you can use. I'm a fan of using Sibelius. I've used Finale in the past, and I've used MuseScore on Linux. Using those is beyond the scope of what we're doing here. I'm simply talking about manual notating of stuff in this case, an iPad, but on staff paper. So we have our note head that's on the space, third space there. If we needed to draw a note head that's on a line, we need to make sure that the line goes through the center of the note head. And also, I'm going to change colors here, we also want that note head to span half of the distance of the space on either side of the line. Now, the reason why you do that is it makes it a little bit easier to read. If you're trying to read music and you have this for your lines, but your spaces are all completely filled, that makes it difficult to read. Now, there are some notations that will cause notes to be smaller, but again, that's outside the scope of just the basics of notation. And this also applies to open note heads that are on the line. A little bit easier to see where the line goes, ideally through the center of the note head, and then you're going to have the note head that is half the distance of the space on either side. Be careful when you are drawing note heads on the line that you don't do this. All right, so the question becomes, is this note on the fourth line or is it on the third space? It's kind of tough to tell. It's taking all of the third space and some of the fourth space, and it's sort of centered on the fourth line. Again, the goal with all notation is clarity. So if you think back, we have our 5 lines and 4 spaces. That gives us 9 notes, effectively. Yes, you can have some sharps and flats, but pretty much 9 letters that we can work with on the staff. And if you've listened to any music, you will know that there are far more than 9 distinct notes that you can hear. Sometimes we have to extend the staff. And I'm going to erase some of our items here. And to extend the staff, we use something called ledger lines. And I'm going to draw a ledger line here. And what this ledger line does is extend the staff by a single line. So if I needed to draw a note that would be 1 space above the staff, or excuse me, 1 line above the staff, that's how it would look. A ledger line, we try to keep that the same distance as we would from 2 lines that are in the staff. We wouldn't want to draw this 1 ledger line note way up here, nor would we want to draw the 1 ledger line note right here, because that just makes it difficult to read. If you're reading a piece of music and you see a note that's this distance away from the staff, you're going to think that that's a really high note versus just 1 ledger line above the staff. Now, if you happen to need to draw notes that are more than 1 ledger line above the staff, what you will do is draw the ledger lines needed below the note. So if I needed a 2 ledger line note above the staff, the second ledger line above the staff, I would draw that. I would not draw this, even though distance is the same. Again, when the performer's reading this, they're going to read 1 ledger line, and that's going to cause an incorrect note to be interpreted. Also, just like on the staff, you have spaces between ledger lines. If you needed to draw a note that's 1 ledger space above the staff, you would simply draw it on top of the 5th line. Traditionally, we do not draw a ledger line above that note. We only draw ledger lines when they're needed. For example, if you needed to draw a note that is 2 spaces above the staff, you would draw a single ledger line and draw that note head above. Now, I know earlier I said that the space, a note that's on a space needs to fill the entire space between 2 lines. That there's an exception with the ledger lines. Simply, you make the note head be large enough as if there was another line right above, it would fill up the space. The same thing here applies to notes that are below the staff. You can have a ledger line below the staff. If you were to have 1 space below the staff, you would simply draw that underneath the first line. You would not draw the ledger line below that. And you would only draw ledger lines if you need them, such as if I needed to draw a third space below the staff line, I would have to draw 2 ledger lines. That would be our first space below the staff, second space below the staff, and third space below the staff. The last thing to consider as far as position on the staff are note stems. We'll get into note stems a little bit more in a future video, but while we're on just the staff and we're talking about distance, I want to go over this real basic thing real quick. A stem, if you have a note that requires a stem, you typically make that stem be 3 spaces long. So if I were to draw a note that's on the second space here, that would be my stem. I would extend up this little area here to where it's going to be 3 spaces long. When you get to the third line of the staff, we typically put stems down. And notice that stems pointing up are on the right-hand side of the note head. Stems pointing down are on the left-hand side of the note head. The one other thing to consider are ledger lines. I'm going to go back to this first ledger line that I drew, and let's say we had some note that's in the stratosphere, way up here. 4 ledger lines above the staff. Sometimes we will break the rule of 3 spaces and go a little bit longer, and we do that just for readability. Sometimes it's appropriate, sometimes it isn't. Let's say that you have a whole passage that's all above the staff. Well, you might not extend the stems all the way into the staff. Again, you want to make it readable. The final point that I need to make about extending the staff are if you have multiple notes. So I'm going to draw a few more notes above the staff here. And this one here. And again, everything I do above the staff applies to below the staff as well. I need to lengthen my stems a bit. Follow my own rule. So notice how each note gets its own set of ledger lines. When you are extending the staff, you will not do something like this. You won't draw several real long ledger lines and draw notes above like that. That's really messy and can be confusing. So if you do have to notate a note above the staff or below the staff, and you have to do several in a row, each one of those notes are going to be getting their own set of ledger lines. So as you can see, there's a lot to just the staff itself and just placing note heads and making sure everything's centered. The key to remember with this video and all the videos is the goal is writing clearly and writing notation in such a way that it's easy for performers to read what you're writing, interpret it, and accurately perform it in whatever way that they need. So hopefully you found this informative for you. Tune in for the next video where I will go into talking about the actual lines and spaces in relation to pitch names and such. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you click like and subscribe to the channel. See you next time.